Welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the Cabral Concept. We are here today with episode 2519. If you'd like to download this case study and actually follow along for yourself and go over the three big takeaways for today's show, head on over to stephencabral.com/2519 because today is going to be an interesting case study. So I like to go over at least one or two case studies per month from our private practice. And today I'd like to share with you one that goes over a higher inflammation-based lab. And we call this our inflammatory or inflammation test or inflammation score test that I really believe everybody should know. I really think that you should know what your inflammation score is so that you can see if your diet is adequate as acting as an anti-inflammatory diet, yes or no, from the range of an omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid ratio. That means the more omega-6s you have, most likely the more inflamed you are. And the more omega-3s you have, the less inflamed you are. So it's a really good marker to look at. It's also the best ones for cardiovascular health and cardiovascular sudden cardiac death. And the reason is that some people have totally normal cholesterol or even low cholesterol, yet they still have a heart attack. And oftentimes this can be from elevated levels of omega-6 to omega-3. That's just one of the reasons. It could be high cortisol as well. There are other factors. But knowing your inflammation score, your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is crucial. Now, please do keep in mind that the average American or Westerner, that means basically all of Europe, Australia, New Zealand, you know, when we think of like, it's not just the United States. So when I say like Westerner, I don't want us to just think like, oh, it's just the United States. No, it's not. It's everyone in an industrialized nation that eats a standard American type diet. That means lots of processed foods, a lot of processed meats, those types of things as well. So I'm going to go over this lab right now, and then I'm going to give you context because it's very, very important. A lot of people are dealing with inflammation in general, and it shows up as brain fog, it shows up as joint pain, it shows up as a stiff body, it can show up as overall puffiness or water retention, all sorts of different issues. I mean, it can even lead to things like skin rashes and hair loss, etc. So when someone comes into our practice and they have 6 or 8 different symptoms, what we like to do is we like to just by process of elimination, find out what their toxicities are, such as omega-6 that we'll talk about here today, and then what their deficiencies are. And our job, again, as simple as it may seem, is to improve their deficiencies, which actually affect your omega-6 levels. We'll talk about that a little on today's show, and then I'll do a follow-up. And then we want to find out, obviously, deficiencies, refill those, and toxicities, remove those. So this particular individual, they were on, they weren't following what many would consider a bad diet, but they were eating really a tremendous amount of meat and organ meat and liver specifically. And again, I'm not against eating organ meat. It can be very nutritious. The issue is it's to the degree, right? So we always believe in a Western-based mindset that if a little is good, well, then a lot must be better. And eating liver every single day and many, many ounces of it may not be the best for most individuals. I mean, you have to look at your overall levels of vitamin A and all sorts of other factors. Again, can it be nutritious? Absolutely. I'm not saying it's not. I'll actually do some ground organ meat with some ground grass-fed, grass-finished beef for myself and my family. So I have no issue with that. Every day, I don't know about that. And so when I look at this particular lab, I find it very interesting because, again, this person had inflammation, poor recovery from workouts. They were having some joint pain. They were having some brain fog. feeling just overall kind of less energetic, and they were just inflamed. And so he said, okay, well, let's run a very simple and inexpensive inflammation test. And so that was our first place to get started. And then we can work on kind of tweaking the diet from there. Okay, so average individual in the United States, it's about an 8-to-1 for omega-6s to omega-3s who run this lab. Now, again, the people who run this lab are even going to be a little bit more healthy, right? I mean, they really are, because they're already running at-home labs. So I don't think it's the best indicator. It's often said that the average Westerner, their omega-6, which again are the inflammatory fats, to omega-3s, which are more the anti-inflammatory, is probably somewhere around an 18-to-1 or 20-to-1. And that's what it is here for the AA. If you're, again, I'll explain all of this if you're not watching on video. If you are watching a video and on YouTube, we appreciate you, and we hope you're subscribing to the channel every single day, bringing you brand new content. So AA on this lab stands for arachidonic acid, and EPA stands for, well, it's basically an omega-3, without us getting down in the weeds, because I'm actually going to go through the entire chart with you in just a moment, but it's the most anti-inflammatory omega-3. All right, so think of AA, arachidonic acid, the most anti-inflammatory omega-6, and EPA, the most anti-inflammatory omega-3. And a lot of people might say, well, DHA is very anti-inflammatory, and that's an omega-3, and I would agree with you. There's no doubt about it. But here's the thing. We've been using this lab now for about a decade, and the nice thing is we found that if you are getting more EPA into your diet, it very easily converts to DHA. So we've never seen anyone have an issue with DHA, but we've seen lots of people have an issue with EPA, which is why we focus on that number EPA. If EPA is good, I mean, I've never seen it not. I'm sure there's some exceptions somewhere in the world, but I've never seen an issue with DHA. All right. So again, in an ideal world, what do we want? Well, this lab's target is better than a 5-to-1 ratio of omega-6s to omega-3s. We found in our practice and from the research, you really want a 3-to-1 or better, but usually a 3-to-1 is perfect, of omega-6s to omega-3s. And you might say, well, why would you want the omega-6s? They're inflammatory. Well, omega-6 fatty acids are still an essential part of cell membrane health, the nervous system, et cetera. So again, we don't want to eliminate them. We just want less of them. All right, so let's take a look. This individual had a 10-to-1, a 10.1 result. So omega-6s to omega-3s is a 10.1-to-1, essentially, ratio. So that means that they had, instead of being a 3-to-1, which is where we want them, they were a 10-to-1. So not ideal, right? And then what was their arachidonic acid, the most inflammatory omega-6? What was that to their most anti-inflammatory omega-3? Well, it turns out it was a 20.7-to-1. So the result was not good. So by running a lab test like this, and again, there's a more in-depth omega-3, like if you want to see the entire breakdown of your omega-3s, which is great, it's just a little bit more expensive of a lab. You can link that. Well, you know what? I'll have my team link it up today at $25.19. You can run either one. This one's very inexpensive, and it just gives you the top line of what you need to know. So I shared this with the individual, and they were very surprised. They're like, well, this is a grass-fed, grass-finished beef and organ meat. And I said, I understand. I get it. And I appreciate that. But what we want to understand is that there are higher levels of arachidonic acid in organ meats. And so while I appreciate you trying to get extra nutrients from that, I think that right now, at least for you, and until we build up maybe your cofactors, that you're converting quite a bit, because these lab tests do not lie. That's why, like, I always tell people, there's no debate. Like, I'm not here to debate people on organ meat or plant-based or this or that. I'm not saying that, because I actually I'm more of a moderate individual when it comes to nutrition. I mean, the best, I don't have to guess anymore. Like, that's the thing. Myself and many other practitioners, meaning like in private practice, we've worked with over 250,000 people. We see somewhere around 20,000 appointments a year. And we just have so much data. And so we don't have to guess. And so we just say to the individual, listen, like, it's just what you're doing right now is getting you these results. And then we can just decide together with the client, do you want to continue to get these results, or would you like to just try something different? Again, I think the worst thing that people can do is become dogmatic about something, because that doesn't serve anybody, right? If the most important thing that we can do is to do no harm and get a client or patient the results that they're looking for, well, then we have to recommend what works, right? I mean, it's only marketers and online gurus that have to recommend what they've dug their heels in on. So the nice thing is it's very easy to get someone below a 5-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3. It really is. And what we can start to do is, and I'm just going to go over this right now. So again, this is very, very simple. You can see the line here, if you're watching this on video, of the 5-to-1. And you can see that this client, this individual is a 10.1 to 1, not ideal. And this one's a 20.7 to 1, right? So for the arachidonic acid to the EPA. All right, well, let's go over a very simple omega-3 chart. So I'm going to bring this up on the screen. And if not, again, if you're just listening to this, that's okay. I'm happy to go over this. So omega-3s can come from things like cold water fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, tuna, what else are the big ones? Trout, and many fish, just in general. I mean, you can get omega-3s from cod, you can get omega-3s from a lot. But again, the oilier the fish, typically, the more omega-3s you'll get out of it. And the skin is where a lot of that is. Okay, then plant-based, flax seeds, chia, walnuts, etc. They don't convert as well, but they can have a good omega-3s in them. All right, so those omega-3s move down I wouldn't call it a steroidal hormone pathway, but a fatty acid pathway that enables them to eventually become, again, from fish, you're going to get EPA and DHA, and from plant-based, you're going to get alpha linoleic acid, ALA. And so that moves down and it's going to become EPA and DHA, or you eat the fish and then it's already EPA and DHA. EPA will actually move directly to DHA. Like I said, DHA can convert back to EPA. The process is just not as easy. You just have to move 2 steps back. And these actually create eicosanoids or eicosanoids, and these are anti-inflammatory. So we get our anti-inflammatory fats. Great, that's our omega-3s. Now, omega-6s, you get those typically from trans fat, processed inflammatory-based fats, like processed foods in general. Think about like cookies and crackers and things like that. And then we have animal fat in general. It could be from eggs, egg yolks, obviously mainly the yolk where a lot of the fat is, animal-based products, butter, etc. Am I saying that you shouldn't eat those? No, I'm not saying that at all. Again, it is about balance, right? It's not about moderation, it's about balance, because I'm going to share with you at the very end in just a moment how this individual who may want to eat more organ meat can very easily balance this, right? And the research actually backs this up. So omega-6s move instead of from alpha linoleic acid, it just goes to linoleic acid all the way down to DGLA. This is important. So DGLA, if you have the proper cofactors, which I'm going to do a follow-up podcast on, you can actually convert more of that animal-based fat to an anti-inflammatory fat, so PGE1 is just a prostaglandin series 1 instead of a series 2, which are inflammatory, right? So one of the big issues is that eventually omega-6s convert all the way down to arachidonic acid, and actually further than that, and become pro-inflammatory eicosanoids, or eicosanoids, however you like to pronounce it. Now, again, omega-3s become eicosanoids, omega-6s become eicosanoids, but omega-3s are anti-inflammatory and omega-6s are typically inflammatory. That's the issue, right? And so what we want to understand is that we don't want to overdo these in general, because that right now they're just being overdone by a lot of individuals. And if you have the proper cofactors, which again I'm going to share on another show, you can actually eat more of the animal-based fats and convert more of it to DGLA, or just GLA if you want to call it that, rather than arachidonic acid. All right, so why don't I, again, I'll save that for another show. Here's the pathway. I'm going to go over that. It has to do with B vitamins, certain B vitamins, vitamin C, biotin, and other factors as well. So we'll go over that on another show. I think that's really important because I don't want to get lost in the weeds here. So basically, omega-3 is more anti-inflammatory. Omega-6 is more anti-inflammatory. The omega-3s come from, as I've again shared many, many times, the foundation of the healthiest diet in the world is a Mediterranean diet. That has been proved through thousands of research studies. Now, does it have to be the exact Mediterranean diet? No. I don't think that you need to eat bread and pasta and a lot of grains in order to be a healthy individual. I think you need to focus on a lot more anti-inflammatory foods from a Mediterranean diet, like the cold water fish, like the nuts and seeds, and fruits and vegetables, just in general. And we need to be careful with the amount of arachidonic acid that we take in from animal-based products. Again, you can still eat animal-based products. I just think that, and this has been seen throughout history, that the more animal-based products you eat, potentially leading to more inflammation in the body. All right. But how can we combat that? Well, the way that we can combat that is if you are someone that's eating a lot of arachidonic acid or a lot of high saturated fat foods, you want to simply increase your omega-3s. Okay. So if you're someone that likes to eat a lot of organ meat or liver, obviously, which is an organ meat, or even things like coconut oil, etc., what you'll want to do is either eat more omega-3 fatty fish, because that's the easiest way to get your omega-3s. And I'll link up the highest omega-3 fatty fish podcast today at 2519, stevencabral.com/podcasts. And what I'll also do is just share with you, because I can't link this up, that it's very easy to take a high 2.5 or 2-to-1 ratio of EPA to DHA omega-3 supplement. So daily omega-3 support is what we use in our practice. What it allows you to do by taking in 2 grams a day of omega-3s is to be able to eat some of the higher, healthier omega-6 fats and actually keep them in balance. That's what we found for a lot of people who want to eat more meat for, let's say, sports or for exercise or bodybuilding or whatever it might be. It's just an easier way to keep things balanced. It's simple, and that's what we do in our practice. Again, that helps all individuals be able to really reach that 3-to-1 ratio. So I would say to you, you can do it in a few different ways. If you are someone that likes to eat wild salmon, wild trout, sardines, mackerel, or anchovies, I know for sure in our practice, if you eat those 4 to 5 days a week, you're going to be able to get that optimized level. Now, if you're not going to eat one of those 5 fish 4 to 5 times a week, meaning like per day, once a day for 4 or 5 days out of the week, then I do recommend supplementation, because I just haven't seen it done any other way. Again, if someone else knows a way to optimize your omega-3s to a 3-to-1 ratio without eating one of those 5 fish, or with taking a high EPA to DHA nutritional supplement, I would love to hear about it. You can just leave in the comments. But again, you have to have actual lab testing and data to back that up and be able to send it to me. Because if not, I don't, anecdotal evidence is great, but I need to back that up with real science. However, I will share with you this. I'm working with a farm right now, meaning like chatting with them, because they say that their beef and meat is actually higher in omega-3s than omega-6s, which I've never seen, like literally never seen. And so I just need to see their research studies backing that up, because even the best grass-fed, grass-finished animals is typically a 1-to-1 or a 3-to-1 ratio, which is fantastic. Again, like that's great, meaning of omega-6s to omega-3. So it's still higher in omega-6s than omega-3s, but just a much better ratio. I've never seen it more anti-inflammatory. But again, I always keep my mind open. So I wanted to share that with you today. If you've never run your inflammation score test, I can't recommend that enough. I will link that up at stevencabral.com/2519. Hopefully this was helpful. Stay tuned for future shows on future case studies of all sorts of different labs. But also, I will do a follow-up on the cofactors you need if you eat a lot more animal-based fats and proteins in order to convert those to non-inflammatory prostaglandins or eicosanoids. All right, take care, everybody. Have an amazing day. And of course, if this was helpful, please do feel free to share it with anyone you believe it could serve. Ever wonder what the best sauna, blue blockers, sleep trackers, wake lights, salt lamps, or other health gadgets are? Or what about the top non-toxic mattresses, sheets, soaps, bath products, toothpaste, and cookware? Or would you like to know the cleanest choices for hemp parts, meal delivery services, supplements, and much more? I personally curated, researched, and now created a resource page of all of my top picks that continues to grow each week. These are the exact products I use in my own life, with my family, in my private practice, and they're the ones I trust. To find out all of my up-to-date recommendations and all the details, simply head on over to stevencabral.com/resources.